Welcome to the Alpha Mind podcast with me, Stephen Goldstein, and my co-host Mark Randall, where we discuss matters related to trading psychology, trading behaviour, trading mindset, and so much more. Happy New Year to all our listeners. We hope you had a great break over the Christmas and New Year period and are looking forward now to getting stuck into markets as we move into this new year. In this first episode of the new year, it is just me and Mark discussing the matter of ego and how our egos impact our behaviours, our trading, the decisions we make. So, we look forward to kicking off 2023 with just the two of us before we move into some outstanding episodes with great guests. Firstly, thank you to our two podcast sponsors, without whose support this podcast would not be possible, and who we are extremely proud to be associated with. Our first sponsor is TradeStation International Limited. Clients of TradeStation International can use the outstanding TradeStation global multi-asset trading platform with access to international markets and where you can leverage their superb professional grade tools developed over many decades, such as Radar Screen, The Matrix, and Easy Language, an intuitive coding language for traders. And with TradeStation, there are no hidden price spreads, just transparent, low commissions. To find out more about opening an account, visit tradestation-international.com/alphamind or go to our website alpha-mind.net or see the link in the episode description. TradeStation International Limited is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK and acts as an introducing broker to Interactive Brokers UK Limited. TradeStation International Limited does not provide investment advice or trading recommendations. Trading in financial products involves risk. You could lose more than your initial investment. Our second podcast sponsor is the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA. The STA provide world-beating technical analysis education and outstanding membership services, including regular meetings, conferences, and support material for their members. I personally have been a member of the STA for many years and also lecture on their fantastic diploma program. This program is also offered in a home study course form, and Alpha Mind members can obtain a 10% discount on the cost of this fantastic home study course. We do highly recommend this if you really want to boost your understanding of technical analysis and how it can be used in markets. To find out more about this offer, go to our website alpha-mind.net or see the link in the episode description. Now on with the podcast.
Welcome to this week's Alpha Mind podcast, and we're myself and Steve thought we'd start off actually with 2023 in a way of just us having a chat. And it's been very evident to us over the last 6 months as we've bounced around all sorts of very, very interesting, very deep and very emotional podcasts. That a topic that keeps on turning up is this thing called ego, and about working with your ego. So who is it? Does it have a name? Do you recognize it? Is it working with you, for you, against you? Big questions. We know that there's a dilemma in certainly the performance end of work and performance end of sport, where you can see where ego starts to take over and things starts to go wrong. But ego at a foundation, civilization wouldn't have got anywhere unless there was an ego somewhere along the line to just grab it, go with it, and move it forward. So we know that ego is important in that sense, and without ego, we'd all just be swimming around like it's a Sunday afternoon, having a nice relax, waiting for somebody else to do something. And so ego is super important, particularly around the decision making and how we hold things like trading. And perhaps it's opportune now for me to just hand over to Steve, just to get a bit of Stevie to the show. JK Steve, as we're now going to be calling. He's just finished writing a book, which has been a real pleasure, a real pleasure for him. So I've called him JK Steve as a result of it. He may well share other versions of the word P, I in pain, he's had to go through to get that thing done.
Well, yes. Yeah, Happy New Year, Mark, and Happy New Year to all our audience. And yes, I just finished writing a book, which I've been working on for, it feels like forever. Unfortunately, it's not going to be out for about another year. So it's gone to a publisher, and there's a whole editing and marketing process around it. But yeah, it's a fascinating question. It's something I've looked at and explored in the book about this relationship we have with our ego, this part of us which may not even really exist. It's almost like a metaphor. We can't say it's a physical part of us. It's part of our mind. Um, Often, in terms of psychology, the ego is seen as this part of our character, which is like, I suppose you can almost say it helps us manage ourself. It's part of our nature, and it's a much maligned part of our nature. It gets a pretty bad rap in the world of trading and uh, in life generally. There's a very good book out called "Ego is the Enemy." Although that's not necessarily a belief I share, and I use an analogy when it comes to your ego, to think of it a little bit like your shadow. That's also not a physical part of you, but it's something that's always there as long as the light is shined upon you. And you can't lose it. It exists. It's just a mere function of the fact that, when we stand in the sunlight or any light, we will create a shadow. Um, we have an ego, and an ego is, as far as I can understand, it's an evolutionary trait, and it exists with a purpose, which is to help ensure that we work to be approved by others, that we work in ways where we get the approval of our peers. And that may not mean a lot, but let me explain what I mean by that from an evolutionary perspective. Um, when our ancestors of um, millions of years ago, the early humans, um, they would have been not too different from primates of other species that lived in groups, lived in tribes, lived in troops, in small numbers, and they depended on each other for the essentials of life. And eh, being evicted from that group, being rejected by that group, was almost tantamount to a death sentence, unless you could find another group who would accept you. So the whole point about ego is its purpose there is to keep you behaving and working in ways which keep you approved and keep you, um, stop you being rejected, because that is existential. It's as important as finding food. If we lived on our own without fellow tribe members, okay, without our fellow group, in those ancient environments, we would starve, we would not have access to water, we would not have access to shelter, we wouldn't live very long. So it was vitally important to belong to a group and to maintain in that group and to identify with that group and for them to approve you. And that was your ego's job. That is your ego's job still, to make sure that you have the approval of your peers and that you're promoted within that group, within that society. And our wiring hasn't changed. We are intelligent, conscious human beings, capable of thought, but our wiring is still the same as the wiring we had from then. And so that ego has that purpose there, which may not be as useful when we're trading, when we have a different objective, a different agenda. But it's still working away. It's part of our system. Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I liked what you said there about it's like the shadow following self. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's from the perspective of self, but from the ego's perspective, it's the physical form following the ego. So,
yeah,
so sometimes the ego can be so in control that it's controlling the physical, and the physical's following the shadow, as
and
opposed to the other way around.
and that's its
Um,
job. That's its
yeah,
job.
and
It's
that's its job.
protecting us. It's a guardian. It's
But
like if you think about if you had a job that was, I know this is going to sound daft, that was shadow dependent. Okay, all right, and your shadow betrayed you. You'd have to find out how to work with your shadow. And it may not sound like there are many shadow dependent jobs, but believe it or not, there are some. If you are a soldier, your shadow could give you away. If you're a hunter, your shadow could stop you, could alert an animal to the fact that you're stalking it. You know, if you're, and you do look like a spy at the moment, Mark, from what I can see of you.
I know. I look for a
If you
Friday.
were a spy, your shadow could give you away. If you're a police following a suspect, trailing a suspect, there are actually jobs, and these people learn, to perform in a way that they're mindful of their shadow.
Yeah,
So
I think it's interesting the impact you have beyond just physical on wherever you are. I guess is part of that debate, and of course the
yeah,
ego itself, it it needs to be fed. It needs to be because it's hungry, right? So it needs we've got our diet, right? But the
yeah,
ego's diet is something a bit different. It
yeah.
needs
We
to be
we
fed.
need to feed the ego. We need to make it comfortable. The ego's purpose, as we say, is to keep you getting the approval and acclaim of your peers. Okay. And, they talk about ego death. I don't know if you've heard that phrase.
Yep.
Ego death precedes real death normally. We cannot live without it. We do need to feed it every now and then. And um, when we talk about people who, we have this all too common phrase in our Western modern society that it's not good to have too big an ego. It's, but do you know what? Our ego has a positive purpose as well. It drives us, it motivates us, it gets us moving and doing things. You know, every great performer, be they a sports person, an actor, a comedian, a musician, an entrepreneur, leader, right, has to protect their ego in order to move forward. Otherwise, they don't go anywhere.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think the one of the other stories I think that you share and I share is the moment that as a Wimbledon final with Djokovic, when Djokovic had to go back to the changing room and slap himself around the face a few times, right? So there is this concept also of realizing and recognizing that you need to go and wake up your ego,
Yeah, yeah,
to bring you back into the game, because you can get a bit complacent at times, and we know that dull markets and maybe being in a position for too long starts to drag complacency. And from time to time, the ego needs to wake up and go, okay, let's just take stock of where I am. Let's just make a different decision or make a decision.
Well, we
Is
have
it,
this we
yeah.
have this thing, yeah. We have this thing where the self, the ego is part of the self, and the self is the engine of your trading. That's you.
So in terms of trading, how would you feed the ego so that you don't overfeed it? So you give it enough to be satisfied, but you don't give it too much to become a problem. How
Okay.
Where's that balance? I'm just positioning that. It's not a question we've asked each other before. So it
No.
just comes to my mind. If the thing needs to be fed, what sort of level of feeding is sort of okay, that's enough. But what does too much look like? Where it suddenly thinks, okay, I'm fully energized, I'm now going to take over.
Okay. So this is about balance. Okay. Like you can't not have a shadow. You can't not have an ego. Okay. And you can either allow your ego to be your enemy, as that book says, or you can work with it in a ways where it becomes your ally. It's motivating and driving you. Okay. And that's, it's helping you set your purpose. So you have a purpose which feeds your ego, But from then on, you move to task, and you don't want your ego involved in the task. The ego is not a good trader. We all know that. When you trade and your ego interferes, it goes horribly wrong. So somehow we need to keep our ego out of our trading, but we still want to work in a way that feeds it. And your purpose, in some way, the purpose you set is how you feed your ego. You want to achieve success. You want to do good things for the people around you that matter to you. The ego is about relationships ultimately. You want to, the people that depend most on you are your family. So you want to make sure that, your ego drive is to help them in life. And then, we do want a bit of respect from our peers, people that matter to us. We do want that because we want them to continue to support us. And, for us to be involved with them.
Yeah, I got a story to bring to you now because of that. So the hedge fund buddy, a Japanese guy that I used to work with years ago, but now runs his own fund in New York. And when he was building his business, he had a background purpose. Okay, he was a trader, he was doing all sorts of leverage stuff and whatnot, fixed income principally. But he had a background purpose that he used to go to this Fifth Avenue church. He was helping with the soup kitchen. He was staying overnight at times. He was giving away his old sort of very expensive clothes to help the community. Really making an effort, and even had a dog, and he had his dog registered as a therapy dog that had his own passport, and he'd take it around the country to old people's homes to be therapy for people that were sick. And he had a reputation. So even though he was a trader, with all the the trading sort of world being his principal focus, his background focus, this purpose, this sort of reason why he was there, to help others, won him more business than him doing marketing, for his hedge fund. So, and the reason for that was that he was bumping into like-minded people with a similar purpose in this soup kitchen and this sort of, this in this sort of church that got to know him. And there were people there that were, board members of JP and, others that, other big American banks that started to get to know him for his purpose.
Yeah.
A different kind of network, but ultimately he would be getting the deals as a consequence of that relationship rather than others. So they were looking after people that had their purpose. And I think that's really important that you mentioned that. So if you can kind of work out what your purpose is, then it kind of satisfies the ego to a point of being content. It allows you to do your job in a balanced way, because we know that balance is a way of an optimal state in terms of trading. If you trade a full time with no other balance elsewhere, then things can get messy pretty quickly if you don't get to take time out or don't have another type of conversation going on. But the purpose thing, I think, super powerful. So if we start a new year with a message is that if you haven't got a purpose, then kind of ask yourself the question, well, what is my purpose? What does that mean for me? Because if you can solve that or kind of work out what it might be and get yourself involved with that, then you'll start to give this ego that we've all got, it's going to start to satisfy it so that it doesn't start to become super hungry. Because if an ego gets starved, it goes from starving to wanting to stuff its face. There's almost like nothing in the middle, right? It can become suddenly a very big problem.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because purpose is everything we should do should have a purpose behind it, and ideally a noble-led purpose that satisfies the ego. But we don't necessarily want an ego-led purpose, because that is where things start to go wrong. I often ask people, "What's your purpose?" And no one who's successful says to me, I want to make lots of money, but they will say to me, I want financial freedom. I know that's really very similar and yet very different. One is wholesome and real and tangible, and the other one is it just exists for the purpose of boosting the ego. And it's the one where if they say to me, I just want to make a lot of money, that just is not wholesome. Suddenly people say to me, I want financial freedom. I want to have the best things in life. I want my children to have the best things in life. I want to travel the world. I want to, that that is a purpose. It doesn't, for some people, helping others. A lot of people I know like to give back to their community and that, but it's got to be something that satisfies the ego, but is not led by the ego. That to me is why it's really important to know what your purpose is.
Yeah, and I think we're giving you a few examples, but I mean, ultimately, we're all so different, and we're all going to have different varieties of just what purpose means for us. But think about that as something for the new year. I mean, if you think, well, yeah, crikey, I've never really thought about that, and I know that we've done some training ourselves, some workshops in some big corporates, and one of the questions we ask within those workshops is about purpose, and actually, it really makes people think, because often people can't give an answer. Generally, I think that's normal because it's something they've never really thought of. But it's worth putting thought into, because it is part of the equation of if you want to be, as we're trying to work out here, how you're going to work with your ego. You're going to kind of have to manage it, and the starting point for managing it is setting your purpose appropriately. And if you've got a purpose that you think's your purpose, that I want a Lambo tomorrow, and I want a flat in Monte Carlo by the weekend, then scrub that out and rethink your purpose. And if you've got a purpose like that, there's a sense of desperation that comes with it, and it sense of why can't I do this quick enough? Why can't I make money quick? I need to trade more to get to my so-called purpose quicker and faster. I have this desire. So it suddenly messes up the way you trade as well, because you're suddenly scurrying around trying to trade the socks out of the market, when you ought to be adopting a more process-driven trading style. And we see that a lot. I mean, you see that a lot on the internet, that there are stories of people that have clearly got the wrong idea about purpose, and have clearly got the wrong idea about the realities of trading, and the fact that doubling your money every day is something that, dream on.
Absolutely. So this mystical thing we call ego, okay, and working with it is really important, because as we say, there are two choices. You can work with it, or it can work against you. And purpose is a way of, first of all, giving it a kind of a place, okay? Recognizing that it needs to be fed, and not ignored. But the other side of it is understanding, how it's going to impact your work, and then working in ways where it's less impactful. Because we do ideally want to keep our ego out of our work, out of our decision making, out of the reasons we do things. And we want them to be based on our purpose, our strategy, our process, not ego-led. We will return to the podcast in a moment. Just a quick reminder about our two outstanding sponsors, TradeStation International Limited, who are more than just a broker. You get the benefit of having an account through them with Interactive Brokers Limited. But as a TradeStation account holder, you will have access to their superb electronic and systematic tools developed over many decades and exclusive to TradeStation users. We also want to thank the Society of Technical Analysts who have been part of the Alpha Mind podcast now for a couple of years and who provide outstanding services to traders, including their excellent home study course, which is available to Alpha Mind podcast listeners at a discount. Google Alpha Mind blog or go to the website alphamindblog.blogspot.com and go to the link at the top of the page that says STA Home Study Course to find out more about this and how you can get a discount. Now back to the podcast.
Yeah, I think, really important. I think we talk about ego, and of course, there's one of the, I guess, the observations is where does this ego exist? Well, it exists largely between your ears. So it's kind of like it's a mental thing. It's something within the fabric of the mind. And so it's whether we want to pay attention to it or not as well. So a lot of this is down to the fact of recognizing where our attention is at any given moment. In the present, tuned into our senses, it's not tuned into the ego, but we can drift into our thoughts and we can start to listen to this jolly green giant that's trying to take us on some sort of fantasy ride. And we can believe it and want to be its friend. And suddenly our behavior is changing because we've decided to place our attention with this mystical creature, Steve says, that doesn't exist. But as far as we're concerned, it could be really, really real. And we know that, there's evidence that some people in sort of the sort of psychotic world, really do believe on this, the noise in their head. So ego can take over personalities.
Mark, it's like a virtual organ. It exists in our mind, and therefore it exists in real life. It's just not something you can hold and carry. It's not tangible, but it's there. It's real, like in a way, like the shadow is.
Yeah,
it's there, it's real.
There was this, I forget her name now, I've got a book somewhere. But I went to this seminar with a very interesting lady from America, started to talk about how her ego, this sort of other voice, this other person that she was living with, basically, but it was this thing in her head, started to really create some quite uncomfortable thoughts for her. And so she used to have a mechanism where she would physically laugh. She would change her state by laughing, sniggering at this ego. It was almost like to just think, yeah, I know you're there. I sort of recognize it, but I'm not going to pay attention to you. And it worked for her. And I'll find her book. It's actually there. It's Spirit Junkie by Gabrielle. In fact, Gabrielle, I know Steve's daughter's Gabrielle, but her surname's Bernstein.
Okay, so it's not the same
one. Spirit Junkie. And it was very interesting to hear her talk in this audience, the fact that she was willing to share that, that, I have this thing that turns up and I have to just laugh at it. And actually, personally, there are times when our thoughts wander off and our ego starts to go on this journey. And it's the noticing that you've gone there that's important and where your attention has drifted. Because that could be changing your trading style mid-flow if you've not suddenly recognized that the other part of you is now in control of your trading strategy. And noticing that you've drifted off into the shadow, as you call it, is, I think, the important thing. And that's all about awareness.
Yeah, self-awareness is that key. Our ego is, and this is something I believe strongly that, and is something I address in the book a lot. Our ego is always trying to grab hold of the reins. As I said before, it's got a job. It's got a job to do. It's a virtual organ. It's part of our self at a mental level, a psychological level. It doesn't physically exist, but it virtually exists. And its job is to make sure that the fellow tribe we're in keep us at the center of that tribe, keep us fed and watered and safe, and don't reject us. and then we have opportunities to mate, breed, because that's our ultimate goal, to produce a legacy. Okay, in the form of offspring, and all that is possible because we belong to a group and we're not ejected. Now that, because we don't live in tribes anymore, in the savannas, doesn't mean it doesn't work anymore. It keeps working away. It's how we are wired. Okay, and it's stronger than our conscious brain. Um, it's functioning all the time. It's always trying to get us to be approved, and we're always working in ways unconsciously that want the approval of other people. You could probably think of it yourself at times. You do this, and part of that is wanting to be right, because when you're failing, when you're wrong, your ego, it feels uncomfortable, it feels agitated, because it fears that you're going to be rejected. It doesn't want you to be disapproved. It doesn't want you to be mocked in some way. It doesn't want anything to happen to you that undermines your position. And it doesn't like uncertainty either. It needs certainty. It needs you to be right to keep you in its own view, proof. So we always want to be right because of that. Okay. And we sometimes, when we will argue with people just for the hell of it to prove a point, even if sometimes we don't even believe in it. We just, once we made the statement, we need to be seen to be right sometimes. And this is happening in the markets all the time. If you think about it, how much do we hate being wrong? We have this kind of pathological feeling which goes through our body, because the ego works, by the way, by sending neurochemicals through your body's sensory system, your neurochemical system. I'm probably using the complete wrong words here. Someone who's more of a biologist could tell me, or a neuroscientist. But when it's pleased with what it is sensing, it sends good neurochemicals through the system: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, that make you feel good. And when it's not pleased with what's happening, it sends, I think it's cortisol, different recipes of those various neurochemicals through your system that make you feel bad. And the purpose of that is to control your behavior so you do the things that will get you approval. Now, you don't necessarily want to be reacting to that when you're trading, because maybe you bought something and you're not planning to sell it, right, just because it's gone down 1 or 2%. Okay, you've got a plan, a strategy where you've bought this and you're holding it because you believe it's going higher. Maybe you're not exiting it unless it starts going through 5%. But as soon as it's moved maybe 0.5% or 1% against you, your ego is sending all these nasty neurochemicals, emotions through your body. And now you start questioning yourself because the ego's in there, and you're going off process, and you're going, maybe I should cut this, and then you cut it, and then the market bounces, and a week later it's up 10%, and you're like, I wish I hadn't have done that. That's your ego getting involved in your trading in ways that you don't realize.
Right, so I'm going to ask you something now that's a bit different. Under certain market circumstances, though, can ego be a good trader?
No.
Never.
No. It corrupts your trading process
At every level. Quiet market, normal market, fast market.
You want to be working. It's not the same as intuition. Intuition is different. So it's good not to confuse the two. Okay, when your ego comes in, it's almost like, so imagine you've got a purpose which you're feeding your ego, and that is to make, I don't know, let's say you want to make, you're running capital for a hedge fund. You've been given $250 million of capital. Okay, they give you rules. You have to make money. You have to not lose money. You have to try and get a decent sharp on that, sort of reduce your volatility of return. You mustn't go below 5% drawdown or you're out. So you do it in increments. You might risk, 0.25 or per half percent on a trade. You've got this rules-based structure around your trading that enables you to achieve your purpose. You have a process that you develop, which is your strategies, your tactics, your systems, your methods that you put into place, which enable you to achieve your purpose. And you have to remain present to that purpose and to that process. And they are not ego-led. They are performance-led. They are aiming to help you achieve high performance. They are not there because you want to be liked by people or because you need to be approved by your buddies in the group. They're there as a task. So they are a task. Okay. And you have to stay on process, aligned to that purpose and present to that task. Now, what your ego wants is it has its own agenda. It's not task focused, it's approval focused. And that's what takes you off high performance. Okay.
Do you think there's a real risk that people that work in groups, for example, can be exposed to getting sucked into a different type of ego, the ego of the group itself?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because I think in trading rooms, that's something that happens where you get someone that's not obviously of a certain mindset's drifted into a very different mindset because the group dynamics change, and it's the group itself has an ego that starts to become a problem.
Yeah, I mean, traders all the time are trying not to have their process polluted by the opinions of others. And yet at the same time, we want to hear the opinions of others because it informs us. We want to hear what people are thinking, what they're thinking of the market, why they're thinking it. So we have that challenge. There's huge benefits to working in groups and with other traders that I think outweigh the negative aspects. But that is very much part of it. We become infected by other people's egos. If everyone else in the room is long, it can make it very hard for you to stand against it and go short. And that's why you have to always get back to your process and not get disrupted by other people's egos, because our egos are responding to those. And that is a big part of the challenge of trading. That's a big part of the social media issue because, and I do the same sometimes. I see someone going, "Oh, I've had a great day." You don't even know if that's a bot, right? But your ego feels crap when other people have made money and you haven't. That's part of how we function. Okay, that's part of how the ego works. It gets jealous. It sends signals down it. That's part of it saying, you're losing your place in the group. These guys, this guy's going to become more popular than you. He's going to become the leader and, you could be on your way out. So all these emotions and that we feel serve a purpose. Okay. And that's, as we say, that is to belong, to be accepted, to be part of the group. But that is not how we need to work with trading. We need to focus on task. We need to be able to read what the group thinks. We need to be able to understand it. And we can't not engage with it because there's more benefits to engaging with it in a certain way than there are not. You get information from people. In fact, you get sensory information. If everyone's long sometimes you want to be going with them. Sometimes you want to be going away, going against them if you understand where the market is within a particular cycle. So this is all part of the challenge of trading.
Yeah, and do you think the man on the street? Now we know there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that perhaps are silo traders, minding their own business, getting on with trying to make money out of what is such a difficult marketplace. Do you think they may not even realize the fact that the ego's drifting in and drifting out? And is there a way, some advice? This is me asking you. I'm interviewing you. So this is me asking you. So, what would your advice be for somebody that is trading away, that suddenly now has to start thinking, okay, I need to measure this thing called ego and gauge its temperature and whether it's actually taken over process and taken over trading, and know when that is. So, what signs should they be looking out for that may be suggestive of the fact that the trading has moved from their self trading to this ego trading? What signs do you think they should look out for?
Okay. God, there's so many of them. And, it's it's a huge question. I mean, this is why self-awareness is so important. This is why, the ability to look back at your trading. The problem is with a lot of this is it doesn't happen in black and white. It happens in grey. And also we don't see it because we're looking forward. We don't see ourselves. We just don't work like that. I used to work in a trading room, and you could see the people that were struggling in their body language. And sometimes you'd see people just kind of going silent. You'd see them getting angry. You'd see them throwing themselves. You'd see them swearing and cursing. And you knew they were caught in that kind of spiraling behavior where their ego's kind of taken over from what they do. They've lost themselves in their ego. And yet you cannot go up to them and sort of say, buddy, your ego's taken over, because they're just going to tell you where to go. Okay. Now I saw that happen to other people, and I know that happened to me as well, and I became like that. We all do. We're all prone to it. But it's somehow, if you can be super self-aware to do that, okay, to have that sort of level of awareness to do that. And that's what the great people do. That's what the great performers do. That's what the great traders do. When you talked about Djokovic at the very beginning of this talk, I could tell you exactly what he said at that point. He said, even though I've played tennis on the big stage for 20 years, I go through the same doubtful moments as everybody else. The inner fight is always the biggest fight on the court and off the court. So trying to win that internal fight is a big challenge. Once you do that, I feel like external circumstances are more likely to go in your favor. And what Djokovic did then is he had the self-awareness, and it was in his quarterfinal match at Wimbledon this year with Yannick Sinner, where he was 2 sets to love down. And he had the self-awareness at that moment to pull himself out of it, to go, not to just go, I'm going to get back into this, but to take him off for a bathroom break, to look at himself in the mirror and say, come on, we've got to, and he's almost like rallying himself and his ego together. We've got to get our head around this. The guy's beating the pants of us. Okay. And that's what turned it around. And he ended up winning the match 3 sets to 2 and winning the tournament. And I know people who can do that in their trading. They are so self-aware that they have those moments. Do you remember we had a guest on called Damien Hughes about 2 years ago, sports psychologist?
Yeah.
He talked about using tripwires. Okay. What Djokovic did there was he had some sort of internal tripwire that snapped him out of it. A tripwire is a tool that you remind yourself when things are going against you, and remember you're working on autopilot, which is why you don't think to see these things, is to check yourself, to just momentarily stop yourself and go, is this where I want to be? Is this what I want to be doing? Am I holding this position for the right reason? am I holding this position for the wrong reason? Am I holding it because my ego has taken over and I don't want to be wrong? Okay. Or is this in line with my view? Is this part of my strategy? Those are simple checks you can do. And it sounds easy. It's so hard, Mark. And I know when I talk to the very best out there, and some of them are incredible, I often say it's almost like they have this ability to stop themselves, stop time, step out of themselves, okay, and then say, right, what do we need to do at this moment? And then go, right, I've sussed it, I've got it right. Go back into themselves and restart time.
Yeah.
That's what Djokovic did.
Yeah, I mean, what he essentially did, and it's the phrase that I've used and we've used, is it's a deliberate effort to change state. But
Yeah.
he changed his state. So he got out of the mindset of the game, deliberately changed his state, went off and had a word with himself, and came back. He came back different because he created a pause where he went and changed his state. Now, of course, changing the state can be as easy as getting up and going and get a coffee. And we know that in trading, people can hug their screens, for hours. But the ability to stop, change state, get up, walk away from it, it's kind of the same thing as what Djokovic done there. And I know I did ask you the question of, what are the signs of ego, perhaps, that have sort of taken over? And I had a client just recently, and we went through a very similar thing. And that was about, jealous of others, jealous of others' flow, being oversensitive to general markets movement, having a mood swing that was almost a market product in itself. Mood was everywhere.
Yeah. That's ego. The ego sets your mood.
Absolutely.
Expectations. That's an ego thing. Ego sets expectations.
And socially, just kind of not connected and forgetting about that side of him as well. And all of those things were signs that, this other part of him was trying to trade. He let go of those things and started to realize that actually it's wasting time, it's wasting energy. And of course, the ego, if you drift into ego state, if there's any state of you that's going to sap your energy rapidly, it's going to be your ego state. So not only is it difficult for and awkward in terms of behavior, but it's going to exhaust you because it's high demand on mental energy, which actually in the physicality and mental side of your body's connected. So if you become mentally exhausted physically, you become exhausted as well because of the vagus nerve interaction and all that sort of stuff. So it's so important to understand how much of a drain it can be to be in that state. And if you're in that state, you'll be the person that goes home after perhaps a super long day, exhausted, doesn't get much sleep, and gets up the next day with no real clue and tries to do it over again. And I think that's one of the signs as well.
Oh yeah. It's it's really good the way you've described that using the energy. The opposite thing is when your ego is out of it, that's when you're in a flow state and you use no energy. When your ego comes in, you're going to move gradually towards a tilt state, and you may even be in a tilt state. And that's what I talked about when traders start throwing themselves. They are in a tilt state, and when they're in a tilt state, they're going to give away their money. And when they're in that state, they will not have the self-awareness to see themselves in it. That is powerful when you can see yourself in it. And the opposite of that is a flow state. And that's the only time where you don't actually use any energy. Your ego is totally out. The ego is not involved in a flow state. It's nowhere to be seen. At that point, it's like you don't have a shadow. That is pure you being at your best.
Flow state is just a beautiful, effortless type of existence, whilst ego isn't. But listen, I think
Absolutely.
tremendous chat today, and we didn't set an agenda because we just wanted to see where we ended up, and I think we ended up just unraveling this onion of ego and just getting through these different layers, and trying not to cry at certain points. But it's tough. We know that it's a risk. Be aware of it, that it's a risk. Start to understand that you can notice it, and as Gabrielle Bernstein said, if it starts to get in your way, just laugh at it, change your state, and like Djokovic, go and slap yourself around the face and wake yourself up, and then get back on task and try to achieve a flow state. Because as Steve said, it's just a luxurious way of being. We can't be in it all of the time, but if you can get in it some of the time, yeah, that's where you start to be very optimal.
Do you know what, Mark? I think that's brilliant, and I think that's a great place to bring this to an end. There's one other thing I just wanted to add, which you triggered for me when you said that just now. In that, you know what, you can spend vast amounts of time, of money, of energy investing in trying to work out where's the market going, where's the S&P 500 heading, where's gas and oil going, where's euro dollar going, where are bunds and T-notes going, okay, where's Bitcoin heading to. And yet none of those are as powerful as doing something like Djokovic did in the moment. Nothing will have had as much impact on your trading as your ability to recognize when the ego has stepped in and is wreaking damage and hell onto your performance. Thank you for listening today. We would like to thank our podcast sponsorship partners, TradeStation Global and the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA. You can find out more about our sponsors on our website, alpha-mind.net, or see the link in the episode description. TradeStation Global is a multi-asset trading platform with access to international markets where you can trade a range of instruments from one single account and leverage professional-grade trading tools. Visit tradestation-international.com/alpha-mind to know more. The Society of Technical Analysts, the STA, provide well-beaten technical analysis education programs. Alpha Mind podcast listeners can obtain a 10% discount off the cost of their excellent home study course. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, we'd appreciate it if you could leave a friendly review or provide a rating for the show on whichever podcast service you use. You can find out more about us at our website, alpha-mind.net. You can follow us on Twitter at AlphaMind101 and at AlphaMind102. And you can connect with me, Stephen Goldstein, and my co-host, Mark Randall, on LinkedIn. You can also follow us and can check back over some of our past episodes on the alphamindpodcast.com. We wish you the best of luck in the markets. Have a good week.